I'm Tobias from Astralis, and welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's a choke-free zone.
Team Liquid were bigger chokers than Astralis. Now, immediately, that's going to sound wrong because the latter part, like, Astralis, the greatest team of all time. Like, I mean, Astralis doesn't choke, right? They win all the tournaments. They're the most clutch. Like, Devices won the most majors of any star player. Even though, by the way, the first part of that, I'm pretty sure Team Liquid players and Team Liquid fans to some degree have come to accept that, yeah, you know what, choking has been a major issue within that org for, well, let's face it, like half a decade at this point in time. But the context of that statement is, first of all, we're not talking about this Team Liquid lineup, the one with Stewie in it. Certainly, they've had their own issues versus Astralis the latter part of last year, but they also won more series in terms of over 2019 than some of the great dynasties in history, minus winning majors. They won many tournaments. They won many tournaments in a row. They won many series in a row. They even went 2-1 in their first 3 series against Astralis on LAN. You don't get to be the biggest favourite ever for a major if you're choking. So I'm talking about the 2018 Team Liquid, and specifically the one, not when they had Steel, but when they had Taco came into the lineup. So we're talking about Elige, Twists, and Naf are still there. Nitro's the IGL, but he's also more of a tactical IGL because he's got Zeus as his coach. And then Taco comes in from SK to be kind of a veteran, a supportive element. This particular lineup, one of the greatest lineups of all time, maybe even a top 10 lineup to ever play the game with what they did accomplish. I'm also not talking about this Astralis or, quite frankly, the one where they had Kirby along with Glaive as well. This isn't the Magisk or Glaive lineups at all. I'm talking about Astralis from their first year, and then the same lineup when they played the previous year as TSM when they had Karrigan. So basically, Karrigan at that point in time. Now, the reason why I say Astralis is, first of all, straight fire for a video title. Interesting, catches your curiosity, come in, it's not like it's a lie. Secondly, everyone now thinks of that core as Astralis. You don't think of them as TSM. I mean, they were only TSM for about a year anyway. Obviously, they were Dignitas even before that. So you don't think of them as Dignitas. That's more like the MSL team you think of. You don't think of them as TSM. Actually, nowadays, I don't think people associate TSM with CSGO. You think of them as Astralis, and they accomplished more as Astralis. And quite frankly, I think maybe as a lineup, they might have even, I think they possibly even, actually, KGB would have gone. But as a core, they definitely played more as Astralis. That goes without saying. So when they were Astralis, TSM, Dignitas, that core, obviously, choking in this core was going all the way back to before they even got Karrigan. Like when they were Dignitas, like they were young pups playing under Fetish. And sure, when I look back now and I look at their ages, it might have been unreasonable to expect them to be that good. But the problem is in 1.6, we really did have a load of prodigies that came through where they just smash your head in if they were 17, whether you were good enough or more experienced than them or not. So that team back then, 2014, they could murk anyone in the quarterfinal, seemingly. They could beat the best teams in the world online. They would even win competitions online. Then they come to 2015, they get Karrigan. Now they break through. They're finalists, they're champions. They could literally beat any team in the world. Although, to be fair, their key kryptonite was the Envy lineups of Happy. But they couldn't win the major. They threw away 3 big chances to win the major that year. They had the Katowice loss in the round of 8 to NiP, which was almost inexplicable if I took you to certain round points in the 3rd map. They had the Cologne loss to Envy in the semi-finals, which was close, absolutely. And that could easily have gone the other way. They had the whole shit with Device's mouse getting semi-broken before that match. And then, by the way, thanks ESL. No apology ever given for that. And then thirdly, they had the Cluj-Napoca tournament where they had an amazing bracket and they fucked it up, losing to their old enemies NiP in the round of 8 and didn't even make the semis. But like they had a clear run to the finals in terms of who they would have played. Then you've got to add in, some of that choking came from, quite frankly, 2 specific people. It came from their superstar player Device, because he was in denial as a superstar, and then he struggled to truly fulfill himself as one. I know that sounds crazy, because if you've watched the game since 2018, you're going to think, we talk about Device is just straight mustard. Like, this guy never fails. Like, just go back and watch it in history. And then their in-game leader, Karrigan, I mean, let's face it, it's not like he hasn't had his problems at majors without these Astralis players with him. He's had other good players, great teams, as we've now even seen with his mouse sports team come along. He just hasn't managed to get it done at the majors. So from both ends of the equation, they kind of had a character that there was something of chokers, right? But I put it more on those 2 people when you look at their careers than the others. Like, I think Cajun B and people would bang their heads off. I think Zipnix has done some great jobs and could have won many more majors potentially. Now, they were already one of the great teams in history, the 2015 TSM lineup. Like, that one was amazing. That team, for me, was the best team never to win a major. I mean, I'll probably do some content on that, and I'll get a chance to dig into the other ones and look into it, etc. Because obviously now the new Team Liquid might take that title. But at that point in time, they were the best team to ever have failed to win a major. That's how good they were. So let's talk Team Liquid 2018 then. First of all, they had more of like a sharp rise. The Dignitas team, it's actually quite cool. They're just like a team that shows the competitive ladder. Like the start was like a round of 8 team, could maybe upset a bigger team and win a map. Then they go to semi-finals for a year. Then they go to the finals the next year and win a bunch of tournaments, but they don't win the major. And then the next year they win the major. Like, it's actually amazing if you look at their progression. It's almost like it was a video game and they're just working their way up to the final bosses and having to beat the sub-bosses and sometimes having to start over because they can't beat that boss from their saved game, as it were. Not a bad analogy. Write that down, Butler. Now, they had some big moments with Simple in Team Liquid, obviously. This guy almost carried them to like 2 major finals. Could have even potentially won a major, I think, if they'd have won that MLG Columbus semi-final against Illuminosity Gaming. But we'll never know because obviously the whole Guardian thing in the final. But that was 1.5 years prior to the team we're talking about in 2018. In 2017, they'd gambled on Stanislaw, trying to make a big acquisition, hoping it'd make them like a super team. It failed. They had to remove as an in-game leader, and then they got a little burst of success in sort of the autumn of that year, which quite frankly showed the potential that had been there that Stanislaw couldn't really unlock. And the talent of those players, they had some really sick players already. At the time, even JDM was still decent enough and could be a big match player. So 2018, they get Naf from Renegades, who's really polished his game and become a carry over there, and shown he's kind of got like a different mentality to the old Naf. And they get Steel, not the Canadian one, the Brazilian one, obviously, from obviously the Brazilian scene, to go along with Zeus, their coach, who's obviously the classic Brazilian coach that had won 2 majors. Immediately, they break out with big performances. They win CS Summit. I mean, they failed the fucking major, but they win CS Summit, beating Cloud9 and SK, in theory 2 of the best teams in the world. They get top 4s and finals already. Top 4s already, rather. They managed to get their semis and finish 3rd at Starladder Season 4, a super stacked tournament. They managed to finish top 4 at IEM Katowice, a really stacked tournament. Then Steel leaves the team and in comes Taco. Now in comes here someone who's an even better version of Steel. He's a veteran, he's a clutcher, he is clutch. He'll always surprise you. He's got better deagle than you'd imagine. He's a winner. He has a great team mentality. I will say Steel has slightly better fragging, but then again, Steel didn't stick around long enough on the top tier. Then, their first tournament was DreamHack Masters Marseille, and actually they bombed this one. They only finished 9th to 12th, shockingly losing a best of 3 to Gambit. But they played Astralis super close, they took a map off them. Hey, already things are looking like, hey, this could be a special team. They go to ESL Pro League, they come 2nd there. They go to Star Series Season 5, they only make top 8. They come to ECS Season 5, they come 2nd place. ESL Belo Horizonte, top 4. Esl One Cologne, they bomb out, last place. EA League Premier, 2nd place. Face It Major, top 4. Nice. That should be a gif. ESL One New York, 2nd place. Epicenter, top 4. IEM Chicago, 2nd place. ECS Season 6, last place. Supernova Malta, not that big an event, 1st place, but it doesn't really matter. And then finally, to round out the year, ESL Pro League Season 8 Finals, 2nd place again. So if you remove the Malta event, the Supernova Malta, because let's be real, there's only NRG that you're really playing at that point in time. Well, admittedly, they'd be the kryptonite of Team Liquid, but they're not an elite team that you should be beating should be losing to for history's sake, are they? Otherwise, we wouldn't even need this fucking video. Remove Malta from the equation and forget the Steel period, and we're talking about 12 LAN events. And over those 12 LAN events, they have 0 titles, they get to 6 finals, don't convert on 6 out of 6 attempts, and they're in 9 semi-finals, and fair play, they win 6 of the 9 semi-finals, so you can tell they're a fucking amazing team, that they're really one of the teams for the ages, it's just they can't close the deal. Now listen, you might say, well, come on, Thorin, you think of that Astralis lineup are the GOATs. In fact, I was saying that, by the way. I think around the time they won the Face It Major, when they hadn't even won that many titles, they'd only been around like a few months at a point in time, like 6 months or something, 8 months maybe. So even though they played in the Astralis era, which yes, it's obviously going to deny you titles, because that's the most dominant team and the most smotheringly dominant and consistent team to ever play CSGO or any version of Counter-Strike. But let's be real here. Yes, they were in the Astralis era. In fact, their first event with Taco was literally the first event where the Megas lineup won. It was their 3rd line. It was the first one where they won the championship and looked amazing, and the only map they dropped was to Team Liquid. So yeah, you know what? It could seem easy to just write it off as, well, that's the main reason, isn't it, Thorin? They were just unlucky that they had to face Astralis so many times, the GOATs, and the GOATs that almost never lose, and they're the hardest to beat, and so that's why they didn't win enough titles. That's what denied them. They weren't choking, they were just 2nd best. It's not that simple, and that's what we're going to get into here. Just look at how many times it wasn't losing to Astralis that cost them either a further placing in the tournament and an even better resume, or a title itself, sometimes even a pretty nice title actually, that would have been relevant to the TSM team of 2015 that was winning all the titles that weren't majors if they were in top form, and very meaningful tournaments, not 250k tournaments because we didn't have any of them back then, but tournaments that had all the teams that would be at a tournament, 250k tournament, and certainly teams that were trying incredibly hard. So we'll dive into some of these results and show you that you can remove Astralis, and there are still some issues here for Team Liquid that suggest it's more on them and their psychology than just facing Astralis. So here we have that first event, DreamHack Masters Marseille, and yes, they lose to Astralis in there. So we'll go down here, look, in the group stage here, it's Astralis' first event where they go really God mode. And in the group stage here, you put in a group with Astralis, you lose to Astralis, but who are the other teams in your group here? And by the way, they give Astralis one of the closest games overall because they won a map. Other people weren't able to. So look, the other two teams are Gambit, who by this point in time is flaming out big time. This is one of the last times this lineup and core ever does anything big. And then you've got Space Soldiers, and luckily, this isn't the fucking internet. So as a result, you're going to take care of Space Soldiers if you have to play them at all. They did 16-2. So they lose to Astralis, but then they lose a 3-map series, admittedly in close fashion, to Gambit. So that's already cost you a playoff spot at that point in time. And listen, you would, if you'd have made the final, had to beat Astralis still, but that would have given you another second place, would have given you another semi-final win. They didn't do it. They bombed it at this point in time. Gambit takes care of them and eliminates them. So then, let's go over now to Star Series Season 5, right? Now, unlike Star Series Season 4, and in fact for all the Star Series since, there was actually, and has been the case rather, there was no Astralis at this tournament. Not only that, you go here and you look, it was the first one that had Swiss System best of, oh no, it was the second one that had Swiss System best of 3 as the format. Team Liquid is the 3rd seed for the playoffs. They beat NRG, Godsend, Vanguard, but they lose a best of 3 to SK Gaming, who still had Caldera and Fur. This is actually when they'd first gotten Stewie into the lineup. And you know what? It was a close series. Like Caldera's heroics on Inferno basically is what allowed SK to win that one. Whatever, you get to the playoffs. There's no Astralis, right? Should be a win, right, boys? Then they get a bracket. Look at this fucking bracket. They have a bracket with NRG, and this is before NRG had gotten really good, because this is when on LAN they hadn't done anything yet. They have AGO Esports as the second best Polish team at the time. I mean, it's the best at this point in time, I guess. Not a very sick team, though, even though they've done well at this tournament. And then they have North of MSL, notoriously a mixture of, I would say, inconsistent. But for me, that's the results are inconsistent. Their performance would be somewhat consistent. It's just that the players weren't good enough to have high-level performance every game. So they just had to grind it out. And so in this kind of a bracket, it should be a done deal that you're in the final. You're playing Na'Vi in the final. And we all know when Team Liquid, this Team Liquid played that Na'Vi, they used to beat them in every best of 3 series. So that's the title right there. There's no Astralis. And then look at the bracket. Instead, they don't even make the final. They don't even make the semi-final. They go out in the round of 8, losing in 3 maps, and 2 of them are fucking stomps by the NRG guys, the guys who are still getting it into gear and themselves should be considered the chokers and not ready to win and all the rest of that bullshit. So then we go over to here and we'll go to ESL One Belo Horizonte. That's how you're apparently supposed to say it, in Brazil, right? You remember this one took place in June of 2018, and what's going to leap out at you immediately, guys? No Astralis, no no Na'Vi. These are the top 2 teams in the world. So again, if you're Team Liquid, you better win this tournament. Like, listen, we can still talk about what's going on with Astralis and are you going to win the biggest titles, but you better take care of this one if you go to this one, boys. So here they are in Group B with Mouse Sports, Big, Now, Temcomo. They don't even win the group because they beat Big. They lose a series to Mouse. Now, this is the Mouse that had, actually didn't have Oscar at this tournament. They had Nothing as a stand-in instead. But this is the one that still has some very good players elsewhere in the lineup. And at one point in time was ranked number 2 team in the world a few months prior. So then you go to the playoffs. They lose to Mouse, but you go to the playoffs. They just lose in the semi-finals to FaZe Clan. And this is FaZe Clan, by the way, when they have your boy Croman as a stand-in. And Carrigan's still there, but there's no Olofmeister. This is when Olofmeister's on his sabbatical. So listen, that was still a very good team. Obviously that team when they had existed, even beaten Astralis, but Team Liquid's supposed to be better, and they just straight up lose there, so they don't even win this event in Brazil. Then we go over, and we're going to look at ESL One Cologne. Now, you can't make any excuses for this event. It's one of the biggest events of the year, of the calendar. Even if it's not a major, it's an unofficial major for me every single year that they have it in a big stadium with fans. So let's go look here. And as I said before, they finish dead last. Now listen, they lose a best of 1 in the upper bracket to Big. That can happen because Big had an amazing run and they were really good tactically. I'm sure they prepped the fuck out of them on that one. They got him on DOS 2. Obviously, tactically, Godby's a semi-genius, right? But the lower bracket match, you can't be losing to North 2-0 I mean, it's close, but you can't be doing that at that point in time. It's not like North do anything. They go out in the very next motherfucking round to MIBR. A bad MIBR at that point in time, by the way. So, coming last place here is disgraceful. Like, yeah, Astralis was there. By the way, Astralis didn't win the event. So, if you'd have been on the other side of the bracket, like Big, if you'd have taken their spot, you could have met in the final Na'Vi, and you could have won that tournament. A team you always beat on the best of 5 in this case, you could have played them. You could have won one of the biggest events of the year. Think about how that changes the narrative of the year, even though it would still make Astralis the best team. Then we'll go ahead to another big event, not as big as Cologne, but still a prestigious event, a key event in the year for me, one of the ones with a lot of spectacle on it, ESL New York in September. So let's look again. Oh, what do you know? No Astralis. So the way is open for Team Liquid, second best team in the world, one of the all-time great teams. So what happens here? So they managed to win their group. Okay, that's cool. Then they managed to win the semis against a not very good Gambit at that point in time. That's actually kind of pulled a miracle to even make it that far. And then they go to the final. They play Mouse Sports. This is the Snacks era Mouse Sports as well. The team that actually did very underwhelming results and was worse than the team before with Sticko. And even though they have the map pool advantage over them, even though they're up 2 maps to 1, even though they're in position to potentially just close the series 3-1 on DOS 2, and then the last map's even one that's classically always been a Liquid map, Mirage, they managed to lose the series in 5 maps in heartbreaking fashion, and they don't win the title, what would have been a nice little fucking title to win. Then we go to Epicenter 2018, a few months later. I mean, it's not a few weeks later from what I remember. Now let's look again here. No Astralis, so again, ways wide open, right? But there's still some good teams there, so let's see what happens. So they get out of their group easily. They play shitter teams at that point in time. Semi-finals, they skip to, and there they play FaZe Clan. Now this is FaZe Clan, where you're going to see Olaf Meister's back. But even though Carrigan's in the team, Carrigan has just been cocked by Nico, and he's not the in-game leader. And Nico is very much calling a kind of game where I often joke, don't want to get in gangbangs with Nico. Like, this is the Nico fucking game called around him, and he's going to pop off and be the MVP if they do well. So they play them in the semi-finals. It is actually a pretty close game on Inferno. Would have been an interesting decider on Overpass. I'd have favoured Liquid there. But FaZe manages to pull it out with some big wins, some clutch players, and they don't even make the final, Team Liquid, and they don't win another reasonably meaningful title. Finally, let's go to ECS Season 6 Finals. Now, yes, Astralis is here. Astralis wins the title, but you're going to notice no Team Liquid even in the top 4. So remember that also, forget Astralis. At least meet them in the final, right? There's no Na'Vi here because Na'Vi doesn't play in ECS. There's no FaZe Clan here because, look, FaZe Clan didn't qualify, right? So at this point in time, what's going on, boys? So we go to their group here. Now, listen. Yeah, best of ones at the beginning of ECS. Sure, it's a shortened format. It's one of those like 3-day weekend tournaments from the old school. They lose to fucking North again. Again! How can it be? Is MSL just a genius or something? That can answer itself. Then they managed to lose a best-of-3 series to their rivals, NRG, because interestingly, in this year, they would actually sometimes lose key series and get upset by them and be Kryptonite, which is funny. It shows how different lineups can be with one player change, and admittedly, NRG's changed players, because now Liquid gets in that ass pretty much every time they play NRG / now Evil Geniuses, right? So they come dead last. Not dead last, sorry. Yeah, they come dead last. They come in last place at this tournament, and it's not even like your boys from NRG do anything. They lose to North as well. So it's actually MIBR coming second and fucking Nip and North in the semis here. These aren't the best teams in the world. Liquid dropped the ball on this tournament again. So that's 7 tournaments with this lineup in 2018 where Astralis wasn't the one denying them a crown. In fact, 4 of the 7 tournaments, Astralis isn't even in the building or with an opportunity to win the title, and they still don't manage to convert. Now, the reason why this contrasts poorly with the TSM / Astralis lineup that was basically the one that played in 2016, and then later they played in 2015 as TSM, and then in 2016 they were Astralis, but they got off much worse then, and they just weren't the best anymore. But when the lineup was in its prime in 2015, they won 5 titles that year. And we're talking about tournaments where the Fanatics and the Envies of the world are in attendance, where you are seeing Virtus Pro in the same tournament field, and they're winning that event. All the great teams of history. They made the playoffs in all 3 majors. They only failed to make the playoffs of tournaments something like twice in the entire year, and one of those was a small LAN tournament in a caster's house in fucking Krefeld, Germany. So who gives a shit about that, right? This is one of the great teams of all time in terms of consistency. And that's the whole point. This team used to make top 4 basically by default unless one of the godlike teams stopped them. The only time they didn't was on 2 occasions when Nip Magic happened. And when that wasn't happening, by the way, they used to get in Nip's ass as well and get revenge for the old days. So are you going to tell me that NRG in 2018 is comparable or better than Nip in 2015? Bullshit. There's no way. Nip were winners. They'd already done championship stuff. They would listen. They were falling off still, but they were still grasping on the edge of the cliff. And every now and then they could claw their way back up. NRG hadn't been there yet. They were never worse. Never mind has-beens. So they rarely ever in this TSM lineup lost to anyone but the absolute elite, the Fnatic, greatest team of all time, Envy, one of the most underrated, second best teams of all time probably, Virtus Pro. Absolutely fantastic core that could always compete, especially in 2015. Like, they didn't start falling off till 2017, for fuck's sake. Now listen, sure, it's not like TSM never had any big hiccups. They had the Ace of Predators Masters tournament I referenced earlier where they lost to Efrag, those Bulgarians with Bobble and all those. They lost to Hellraisers, who at the time was like a really played out lineup. They also, like I said, lost to Nip in Cluj in the round of 8 miracle that didn't even continue into the next match because Nip got absolutely fucking hammered by Na'Vi and Flamey and fucking Guardian in that semi. But you know what? They didn't blow easy chances like Liquid did. They didn't lose to the NRGs of the world in big tournaments and North, for fuck's sake, to deny themselves titles or sick bracket runs. So there's another element to add in here. You know what would have been a brilliant excuse for Team Liquid? Is if they'd lost to Astralis every time, and then a bunch of these ones that they'd lost, where Astralis isn't there, Simple just gets them. Na'Vi, you know, 3rd best team in the world, maybe at times 2nd best team in the world. Na'Vi just gets them in Simple styles. He goes ham. It's like playing Michael Jordan. It's like, yeah, I had 46, but Michael Jordan had 55, so what can you do with that shit, right? He beats me. I can't do it. He's just better. He's just outperformed me. No. So even though you're playing the GOAT, the best player ever in CSGO, in his GOAT year, no less, you actually beat him every time you fucking play him. Now, you know what? Like I said, that would have been a sick excuse. I had not only the GOATs in terms of the GOAT team in my era, I had the GOAT player, and I had to go head to him as well. But actually, as I said, they beat Na'Vi every single fucking time they played them in best of 3 series. So as a result, it wasn't only Astralis. Now, that's not to say that they'd lose all those finals that they play against Astralis if it was someone else than Astralis. Like, it's not like they'd have done an ESL New York every time. I think at a minimum, they probably win at least half of those finals if it's anyone other than Astralis in them. Because listen, when you're as good as they are, and you have that many chances, you're not going to chalk each time. You're not going to have problems every time. In fact, if they'd have had Na'Vi there, a team that they had a brilliant matchup against, maybe they win all of them. Maybe then they're adding 6 titles, and they're just looking fucking sick. But how about this? Imagine a world where every result in 2018 is the same, except they win all the titles at the tournaments they attend that don't have Astralis. So, Star Series Season 5. Yeah, you know what? They managed to win that tournament. Great. Belo Horizonte, ESL New York, Epicenter. Some of them are good titles. ESL New York, Starladder. They're still not the biggest in the scene, but what a year that would have then been in context. Just having those 4 titles would be a pretty big deal, right? Might already put you as like the 7th best team to ever play CSGO. I mean, they already are on the brink of the top 10, I would say. I've never done the list, but I'll put it together. So this is one of the things you've got to do. You've got to put it into context. Yeah, I like the big narrative pictures, and yes, it ultimately was Astralis that stopped them, but they had bigger problems than just Astralis that year, and it showed in their character. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.